All there.
Okay, so let me introduce our first presenter today, Denis Gagne. Denis is a well-known expert in business process and decision management. He is the one who coined the term Triple Crown for BPMN, DMN, and CMMN standards. And Denis is not only contributes to the proper standards, but he is also a creator of a very popular product, Trisatec, which demonstrates and tests all these standards together and in real world environments. And this year, Denis is our first speaker, and he will touch a very popular topic that would be around this conference all 3 days. Denis, let's start.
Thank you, Jacob. Good morning, everybody. Real happy to be here. Very honored to be opening the conference this year. My presentation this year is how do you feel about low code? And I've yet to figure out if this is a rhetorical question or a real question that I'm asking. You'll see that my presentation this year is pretty much a continuation of the last 5 or 6 years that I've been presenting at DecisionCAMP, building up on what we've done and what we continue to do with the decision model annotation. So I'm going to talk today about our current context, about weathering the storm, the no-code, low-code, pro-code paradigms. I'm going to talk about feel. I'm going to talk about how feel compares to other things that are available. I'm going to talk about model-driven development using feel, and then I'll provide my conclusion. So it's a straightforward presentation. I don't think I'm going to present anything controversial, but I hope it is a little bit, so we'll have a discussion afterwards, and I'm going to be happy to get into the conversation with everybody. So our current context, it's a wild world out there. So this is a slide that's at least 6 or 7 years old for me, about the world we live in. Just to say that we keep living in that world of very volatile economic outlook, growing customer expectation, increasing regulatory requirements, fast evolving technology, increasing competition. So I would claim that this is pretty much status quo by now. This is the way we do business. 5 or 6 years ago was a kind of a new paradigm for us to live in this kind of quick swirl world. Now it's really just part of how we look at business. Now, along with that, there's been a big progression, I would say, of trying to name what's going on, from agile to flexible to resilient, anti-fragile, composable. And I would argue that all of this is about being adaptable. So pretty much organizations now today have to be adaptable or want to become adaptable. And I've just pulled out the definition at the bottom of their adaptable, which is able to adjust to the new conditions or to be modified for a new purpose. It seems like it covers pretty much what we're trying to do in business these days. Now, something's a little bit different now is that we're entering, or we've been in the perfect storm for over a couple of years now, and this perfect storm is not going away. And this perfect storm is really generated by the ever-growing needs of digital transformation, and it's combined now with the accelerated transition to remote work. Remote work, as in a couple of years, changed the way we see on how we carry out our business, how we do our work, how we get things done. And it seems like it's not going away, because certainly in Canada, all the major cities like Montreal and around Canada, and I've seen the same in the States, they're fighting to bring people back downtown and into the towers. Companies are now putting rules on forcing employees to go to work. I think we've turned that curve and we're there. So the reality of this is that it's hitting just about every industry. I don't know of any industry that's not been hit by this digital transformation and the fact that we're doing a lot of remote work. So what's particularly challenging now in the middle of that storm is that we seem to be losing technology professionals, software developers. I don't know where all these people went. I locked down, hibernated towards through COVID, and when I come out, we're missing people everywhere. Like there's nobody to serve table. Restaurants are short on people. Technology firms are short on coders and developers and IT people. Honestly, I don't know where all these people went. We lost them. But that's the reality. That's just reality. I just came back last week from being in Baltimore. A lot of the restaurants are closed. A lot of the shops are closed because they just don't have the employees to open up. So how do we go through this storm? How do we actually thrive rather than just surviving through this storm? We have to think of new ways of doing things. Now, the reality of business, and at first this slide was called the reality of IT, but I think it's the reality of business in general, is that there's an increasing demand for digital transformation. Everything is moving to the cloud, and God, are we ever having trouble with cybersecurity and privacy threats and all this? It's crazy. Everything is just going wild. Now, software developers are in high demand and in short supply. That's just the reality, and it's not going to get better. The boomers like myself and many of us on this conference, we're more on the way out than on the way in. And there's not all that many people to replace us behind us. So how do we actually address or do anything in this context? So we have to look at unleashing a different workforce, increase the number of people in the organization that can help us create these digital business solutions. Because it's not just apps, it's not just code, it hits every aspect of the business, whether it's marketing, HR, logistics. We have to find digital business solution to survive in this context of remote work, digital transformation, and now the lack of resources that are technology savvy. So what are the options to face this situation? I've listed three. Probably people that are more astute than I am will come up with more ideas, but you know, the three basic idea is we could hire people, but there's no availability in the market. We could outsource, but the problem is all the organization that provides outsourced services, they're themselves short on staff. Plus, they lack the actual domain expertise we need or the organization-specific expertise. So one option that seems to be the right answer for now is to try to upskill the people we have. So it's the right idea, but how do we accelerate this upskilling so we can increase the capability of our existing workforce? So the idea is to empower the non-developer in the organization so they can help us automate the business logic. And I say automate here, don't take it literally that I'm saying let's automate everything. We all know that this is not feasible or even desirable in an organization. An organization is as much defined by its people and its culture than anything else. The products are important and the way we deliver the service, but the people are the beating heart of an organization. So I don't believe we'll ever automate everybody out of an organization, and I don't think this is even desirable. But it is a challenge that we have to face in these conditions. So I suggest we focus on the business knowledge workers. The business knowledge workers are a very interesting set of people in our organization because they really excel at business decision thinking. They know the business, they know how the business should run, and they're providing this value to us. So they have this knowledge, they have a clear understanding of the logic. They have the best understanding of the workflow and decision that are required to deliver satisfaction to the customers. So they know how to deliver what the customer wants, whether we're producing products or we're delivering services. These knowledge workers are really the brain and heartbeat of our organization. Excuse me. And we've been using the knowledge worker a lot in the last 15, 20 years to be our source of knowledge. So normally, we'll refer to them as the subject matter expert or whatever, and us people here in decision intelligence and decision automation or expert system, or for at least 25, and I probably, some people will say it's more than that, it's 35, 40 years old when we started the expert system movement. We were relying on these people to be basically the logic architects of the business. So I'm saying now, well, maybe we should consider them then more than just a logic architect, but actually use them as our construction workforce for this digital transformation. So the best of both worlds. So these terms are certainly used by Gartners. I don't know if they coined them. They've been around for quite a while too. So there's the idea of the citizen developers, which is the people that their job is business, but they can create technology. And we have the business technologists, which their job is technology, but they report to business. So most organizations, small and large, have these two kind of resources that they can exploit within their organization. So let me talk about no code, low code, and pro code a little bit. So here's my definition. It's probably agreeable by most. It overlaps and doesn't really contradict anybody else's definition. So no code is basically what you see is what you get. It's the click and drag and drops type of paradigm that we see. Low code is the usage of these business-friendly expression language. And I didn't say the main specific language, but the main specific language would fit in here as well. And then we have pro code, which is the programming language that a lot of us, or most of us, are used to for many, many different years. Now, right now, there's a lot of market confusion about these terms: no code, low code, pro code. Naturally, it's being confused and over-abused by the vendors, marketing, and also the analysts, everybody jockeying for attention. That's the great thing when something new becomes a topic. Everybody wants to reclaim it in their own way. But sometimes, at the same time, generating a lot of attention, but generating a lot of confusion. One thing that is important, and I think get lost in many of the messages, is that no code, low code, and pro code, they're not platforms. I get scared when people say it's a no code, low code platform or what. It's not a platform, it's a development paradigm. Now, these paradigms can be applied in any platform. And I think a platform should take advantage of all three. That's certainly what we do at Trisotech. And there's big advantage to exploit these three paradigms within your environment. So no code, low code aim, basically, as we would expect or desire, there's always similar from the different movements that are coming in. We're looking at the timely delivery of digital business solution to optimize the development process of these solutions, and now to democratize these solution creation. And one topic that's been near and dear to me for all my career, for the last 40 years, is to close the business IT divide. This divide has slowed down so much of what we could have done in the last 40 years. Now it seems like the time is right, and I believe that these approach and these paradigms are a good opportunity for us to close that divide. Now, some of the characteristics of low code, no code, a lot of time, most of the time, they're a visual approach to the development. They use simple and concise language. They usually try to use some human-friendly syntax, and reusability becomes very important as we're trying to accelerate the pace and make it more accessible to people, and also becoming adaptable organization. So some of the benefits, claimed benefits of no code, low code, these you can find at just about any vendor. They offer higher productivity, decreased cost, improve adaptability, and lower dependency on IT, which all seem to be very great benefits to go and exploit in the current context that we live in. Now, some of the challenges, and those are not my challenges, those are challenges you can find anywhere around the web or the internet. You know, some of the challenges that low-code, no-code platforms have right now is that they create a vendor lock-in, because most, if not all of these platforms are non-standardized platforms. They also have limited expressiveness that's been complained by many adopting organizations to address the particular sophisticated business logic that there is in different industry, whether it's the vertical or the broad access to the logic. They also lack the domain specific to support interoperability within an industry. And then they give rise to what we call the shadow IT, which the proliferation of all these applications. So those are certainly challenges that we have to keep our eyes on and look at how we could address those. Now, don't be fooled by the shiny new object. I'm a big proponent of that. Everybody that knows me, I've been working for pretty much all my career on how to abstract the capability of capturing logic for automation or just for communication among people. Low code, no code, pro code, basically low code and no code, they still require a person to be able to think in an analytical way and a multidimensional way, what I usually call the Cartesian thinking. And I always say, well, if you have somebody that cannot think in a Cartesian way, they're going to have trouble even with no code or low code. It requires an understanding also of the notion of data and typing and the notion of class and instant. So fundamentally, you know, it requires that you're able to think a little bit like a developer. So, and that should be an important thing that we keep in mind, is that low code, no code, although it makes it very more accessible to everybody, as we've seen for years and years with the Excel paradigm, Microsoft Excel, some people can create great Excel sheets and calculation, others will create a mess. So we have to be mindful of this, that it is for more people, but not necessarily for everybody. So let me start talking a little bit about FEEL. And I believe FEEL is an ideal local language. So what is FEEL? Most of you here know. If you don't, FEEL stands for the Friendly Enough Expression Language. It was created as part of the decision model annotation, which is a standard for decision automation and decision requirement capture. FEEL is a standardized expression language from the object management group. It offers standard syntax, standard execution semantic, and it claims, and I believe it is, simple enough for non-technical people, but expressive enough for technical people. So what are some of the main characteristics of FEEL? FEEL is a functional, stateless, side effectless, and context-sensitive language. Basically, the general idea is given the same input, you get the same output every time. Now, functional means that you provided value and you get an answer back or a result back. It's an in-out type of situation here. Stateless means that the variables are immutable. I know some people are probably chatting now that, well, with version 1.4, we introduced now and today, which makes the language no more stateless and side effectless. This was introduced to reflect reality, but at the core, the language remains, and the recommendation is to maintain these capabilities. Side effectless means that we have a closed world assumption around the language, and context sensitive is what I really want to put some emphasis here. Now, that means that the names and the terms we can use in the language can have spaces, and I've heard a lot of bitching about that through the years, but fundamentally, that's a very big element to make the language business friendly. If you're interested, I gave another presentation at DecisionCAMP that's called What's in a Name, that talks about the importance of naming and business friendliness in that sense. Please feel free to go back to that presentation. So let's talk a little bit more about fields expressiveness. So fields offer typing, simple and structured types. It is based on a 3-value logic. Now that's very important, and last week I was at a healthcare conference where I've been asked to compare another functional language that is domain specific called CQL to field, which is also based on 3-value logic. But CQL and field don't use the same logic semantic for the 3-value logic. So basically, for those of you that are not too much in these details, a 3-value logic means that we have true, false, and null in the case of field. So, and null can mean either a known unknown or an unknown unknown. So I don't know that I don't know, or I know that I don't know. And depending on this interpretation, you'll have a different behavior of the logic. So it's important to, when you go into these details, to look at this. Field also offers inline operators for arithmetics and what you would expect. Now, one thing that is not very well known and started to be more and more exploited is the whole functional aspect of field. So within field, you can actually create user-defined functions, and that's a very powerful feature of that language. It allows reusability in all kinds of contexts. Field also comes with a set of core defined functions for logical manipulation, text, date and time, list, math, and context, which is a particular way of dealing with field, which is the notion of context. And there are, right in the spec, all these functions, built-in functions, are defined and explained with their actual logical meaning. Now, a couple of years back, I've also pushed into field the introduction of the notion of temporal logic using interval function, so we can do temporal reasoning. Again, a very powerful feature of the field language, because it is needed in just about every industry to know, was the invoice paid before the SLA dates, or did you meet or succeed in meeting the logistical SLAs? There's all kinds of different applications in all kinds of industries for temporal logic. It's a major element, and field has all this now. It got included in 1.4. Another feature that is not quite used yet, and that certainly TriZetech is exploiting a lot, is the capability of field to import a library of functions. And it becomes very interesting when you can actually import domain-specific functions. So for example, financial or healthcare type of functions, or any other kind of function. So it allows us to have field as a very powerful language that can adapt to the actual use case or the industry it's being used in. So the friendly enough aspect of field comes from the names and terms that include spaces. It allows people to name things the way we would in a general conversation, or the way they're named in the organization. Pretty few organization names or discuss things with hyphens and camel case and all this. We're used to communicate as close as possible to natural language. And I know I just raised Ron Ross' ears there. He said, oh, natural language, we should do that. So field becomes also a lot more friendlier when we combine it to box expression. Box expression, in my mind, is one of the greatest value of DMN and field. So when you combine field with box expression, you get very powerful environment. So what are box expression? It's basically a visual structured way to capture the field expression. It's a simple, very recursive type of visual format it's composed of a basic structure of name expression. So everything is a name and the expression. A name, and here I should have probably put the return box, but name expression, and this is recursive. If you want to learn more about box expression, I made a presentation at DecisionCAMP a couple of years back, losing track if it was last year, which is thinking inside the box, which is all about box expression, and at the time augmenting box expression with other structures that are now part of the standards. So what are these different types of box expression? So we have what's called literal expression, where you basically have your name and your expression. If you want to write it more like code, you can put the full expressiveness of field in the literal expression. We then have decision table, which is one specific type of box expression. Some would argue the most powerful type of box expression. Some would argue the only type of box expression you should use. I just say it's one of them. It is very useful and powerful when it comes to condensing your business logic. But we also have the notion of context, where we can express a series of local variable, name and expression. We have the notion of relations, where we can put all kinds of data pieces in relation to one another. We have the functional definition, where we'll provide the function, where the F here doesn't stand for function, but it stands for the fact that it is expressed in field. The standards allows us right now, as it stands, to also express functions that are PMML or even Java. So we have a place here to open to the world. Invocation, where we'll pass the parameters to the invocation, and lists. And the new kids on the block with 1.4, the conditional box expression, the iterator box expression, the different type for in, every in, and some in, and finally the filter box expression. And these box expression, I argue, and I like to debate this with anybody, makes field and the expression language of DMN probably the best candidate there is for low code right now in the market. So let's look at a little bit of an example. Here's a statement here in natural language policy. You know, the loan monthly installment is obtained by adding the loan monthly fee and the loan monthly repayment, etc. A standard loan carries $20, while a special loan $25. The calculation is with a monthly payment. So typical example that you would get of a policy. Now, when we express this using field and box expression, another feature that got added to field is the possibility to comment the business logic completely in line. So here you see that all my names are business friendly in the sense that they use space. So the loan monthly installment is something that any business person can read. It's non-cryptic. Non-cryptic is very clear. And the same about my parameters here, product type, and my internal variable or the names within loan monthly fee, loan monthly repayment. And you can see here that I can add all my logic in there and express different things. And here, you know, the loan monthly statement is by adding the repayment in this, which is here, my loan monthly fee plus the loan monthly repayment. My loan monthly fee is obtained with this logic that is embedded here. And my loan monthly repayment is making use here of one of field's capability of using an external function library, in this case, a financial function library for a repayment calculation. So, and I've created this loan monthly installment as a function because I want to reuse this piece of knowledge, this piece of logic within my field, my DMN or my field expression anywhere. Now, I would argue this is very simple to understand. I've yet to meet business people that cannot read this and understand what's going on, and even more so with the common sense. But I will also argue that even if I remove the natural language description annotation from it, fill by itself is very easy to read with its term. And also, that makes the logic very easy to maintain, to enhance, to adapt, to reuse in many different ways. And we all know, I certainly could not read any of the code I wrote 30 years ago because I didn't comment it in like anybody else. And probably that logic would completely elude me. It's the same right now. If you don't put the logic breakdown clearly in your code, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, you don't remember how and why you did things in a certain way. Where with feel, the structure of the code is made obvious with the box expression. Now, I could have written this in pure literal in feel, and it would be quite readable maybe for programmers, but I would argue that the box expression certainly make it readable for business people and knowledge workers. Now, I've been arguing about using feel in the full BPM plus stack, what I used to call the triple crown, and then got rebranded, or we started using BPM plus in the last few years, mostly within the healthcare world. It was too complicated to say BPMN, CMMN, and DMN all the time. Plus, there are other candidates to come into that stack. So we use the moniker BPM plus now to refer to all of them. And here you can see within a BPMN data input mapping, and I'm doing an input mapping using box expression. So on the left here, you have all the variable of the functions that I'm calling or the service that I'm calling. In this particular case, I'm invoking a healthcare service. And this healthcare service is expecting all its input as no yes string for all the different elements. And then you can see here how using feel and box expression, I'm basically just mapping into this in a very simple visual way too. So this makes it very amicable and easy to use for knowledge worker and also for coders. The logic is clear and obvious, and it's maintainable. So feel, certainly at TriZetech, we use it in BPMN, CMMN, naturally in DMN, and in more of our tooling, and will continue to do so. So that's all nice. Feel is great. The neat things, feel is great. A lot of people don't think feel is great. So is it really business friendly? So let me use Microsoft formulas as the pinnacle of, or quintessential of expression language for business user, because it seems to be the bar or the reference against which we measure things. Is it as easy as Excel, or is it as good as Excel? Because we have Excel everywhere, and business people create with Excel. Now, some of this work is in reference to a blog post from Bruce Silvers on the topic. So let me look at this. So here's the example of my reusable feel box expression that I just showed you about low monthly installment. And by the way, this is a modified example from the specification, the DMN spec, chapter 11. And so here's my logic here. And here's the same logic expressed in Excel. Now, in Excel here, I have the literal expression. I could have written it in the literal expression, but I want to showcase the fact that the box expression gives me a lot more readability and understandability. Now here, my B1 cell, and I've put beside, the names, which is the typical way a lot of people would do. But these names here, they're non-related. They're only coincidentally related to the actual cell that contains the content. Now, there is a way, though, you can also in Excel, in all admission, that you could rename these cells. But here, naturally, I'm preaching for my own religion. So I'm showing that this expression here which use embeddable function into one another, Lisp type approach, makes it very hard to look at this, understand what it's doing, and compare to the box expression beside it. Let me tackle a couple more examples. So here's an example in Excel. I copy-pasted this from Bruce's blog, and I think copied it from another example from Microsoft or whatever. But can anybody tell me what this expression A2 here is doing? It's obviously using A1. And can you tell me what that does? Well, let me tell you what it does. It does exactly what this field box expression is doing here. It basically extracts the last word from a list of words. So you can see here my logic is quite explicit from the way it's captured. So this function here, or this box here, is returning, this decision is returning the last word from a list of words. The list of words is basically taking the input string and separating it in different words using the space as the delimiter. And then I take this list of words and I filter the last word. And these two do exactly the same thing. Here, whatever I type in cell A, I will get the last word in cell A2. So again, this particular example is taken from Bruce's blog on field versus Excel formula. I encourage you to go read that blog post. So the point here is that I would argue that field is at least as simple to read or to create as Excel. I would even argue that it's a lot simpler and a lot more amicable, not only to business people, but to anybody that has to go and maintain this logic, modify this logic, or adapt this logic. I think it goes, it's QED here. So let me talk a little bit about model-driven development using field, which I think is the best of all worlds. So model-driven development, as Jacob mentioned, I use personally, and we still do at TriZetech, call it the Triple Crown for BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. Now we use the moniker BPM Plus. For those of you that are not aware, DMN is all about automated business decision. Oh, I'm going to get some heat on that. BPMN is all about automated structured business process, and CMMN is all about automated unstructured business process. And I say I'm going to get heat about the fact that I say it's all about automated, because the language can be used naturally to draw pictures, but I can also use a piece of paper to draw a picture. The whole idea of using model-driven development is so we can capture the knowledge and the logic in a way that is both consumable by people and by machine. Now, with BPM Plus, you have the no-code type of approach, fundamentally a visual drag and drop paradigms, and all three languages can interact with one another, making things closer to low-code. When you go into the hidden attribute, that's when you fall into low-code. And that's where putting field in the middle gives us a lot of power. So basically, field is already part of DMN. 6 or 7 years ago, I made a presentation at DecisionCAMP on bringing field into BPMN and CMMN, which we've done at TriZetech. And I know a lot of different vendors are adopting this approach now. They're starting to see the light. So we're going to have a much more powerful environment with field in all there. And the best of both worlds basically is by putting field in the middle of model-driven environment, we get the best of all worlds, because in model-driven environment, we can invoke external code. We can do it through tasks, through services. There's all kinds of ways of encapsulating this. So fundamentally, putting field in the middle of the model-driven approach and putting BPM Plus in the middle of the no-code, low-code, pro-code kind of paradigm, I would argue we get the best of both worlds. So my conclusion is, how do you feel about low-code now? So how to thrive in the context we were discussing at the beginning, I would say adapt a decision thinking mindset. Don't perceive every challenge as a business problem to be solved, but rather as a business decision waiting to be made. So consider what's going on in terms of decisions. And you'll see that it simplifies what you need to do to solve these problems. DMN is the perfect language for doing this. So adopt DMN, the decision model and notation, as the cornerstone for your decision thinking, and use feel as the choice of local language in your organization. So a little bit earlier, I've pulled some of the challenges of no-code, low-code approach that were floating around the internet right now. The whole idea of vendor lock-in. With feel, we get out of this vendor lock-in because it's an open standard. So anybody implementing feel is implementing the same way. It's the same language. It means the same thing for everybody. It is a universal language that everybody can adopt. So maybe some of the companies, vendors rushing to the market with low-code and no-code approach should consider using feel in their environment, making their platform a lot more open. Another challenge of the low-code, no-code movement now is limited expressiveness, basically either to address sophisticated business logic. So in feel, the claim is that we're simple enough for non-technical people, expressive enough for technical people. And the standard is continuously evolving via the revision task force that's going on. We're working on DMN 1.5 as we speak. So the language expressiveness will grow to adapt to the current world. Naturally, if you're a vendor and you have your lock-in language, you're going to try to exploit your investment in that development before expanding. But if you use the standards, it comes in for free from the work that the standard is expanding. Lack of domain-specific support. I've shown you and we've discussed Feel's capability of bringing in domain-specific libraries, for example, financial libraries, healthcare libraries, all kinds of different libraries that can be brought in to that. There's also possibility of doing some more advanced stuff. We could think of bringing in even the R libraries. So we have a little bit more of the machine learning taste of things. And in fact, Tom de Beauvois and I are doing a presentation at the end of the conference on Wednesday. So if you still have the mind to be still around for the third day of the conference in the afternoon, Tom de Beauvois and I are presenting an actual use case where we've coded, quote unquote, machine learning and AI paradigms using feel rather than doing it in Python or any other language. And believe me, it gives us a lot of flexibility for all the refactoring that we need to do as we're doing this. And it makes our logic more visual and understandable because it gets pretty funky. And then the rise of the Shido IT. I don't think there's a clear necessarily answer from Phil on that, but certainly with Phil and certainly with Trizatec clients, they're using an approach that promotes reuse and DevOps. And as I mentioned before, don't be fooled by the shiny object. It's not because it's an application that was developed by business using low-code, no-code, or using Phil and DMN that it doesn't have to be fully tested and integrated into a DevOps pipe. It is a must. We have to put in the best practice of using these languages. And that is my presentation for today. I'm going to be ready to answer questions. I just hope this presentation made you feel good.
That's great. Thanks, Denis. Obviously, you and I have had many discussions on this topic in the past, so it's I'm very interested to kind of see where things are going here. I do have a few questions over on Slack. I'm going to start with Tom had a question asking if you can explain how you would provide business users access to information in databases.
Well, so it depends on the platform. So there's different ways of doing that. There's different access. Within the TriZetech platform, we've provided something that's called the cloud data source, which allows you to have a cloud data source, which is all expressed in field. So the structure of the data structure is expressed in field, more specifically in terms of expressions that you can use in there. But you can also have queries that are done to bring different things. In TriZetech, we have OData abstraction that allows, again, in a standardized way to connect. Other ways of doing it is through subscription of changes in a database, so you become more event-driven. So there's all kinds of different integration that are possible.
And then Hans had a follow-on question in there just about how to make use of existing reference data, or the other way around, how do you serialize field reference data? And just like, is this an important aspect that we need to be thinking about here?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but field and DMN is stateless, so the data is all immutable within your logic. So the data comes in, it gets computed and provides you the answer in a stateless fashion. Now there are possibilities, and different vendors will open the box for you to do different things. So I'm not sure I quite get it, but I assume by reference data you mean contextual data, and within the context of this is done by CMMN and BPMN. So BPMN provides you with the statefulness of a process and that context, where CMMN will give you the context of a case file, which is more of an unstructured data environment that provides you the statefulness for your field decision.
Okay, so there is a question over on Slack, and Hans, if you want to unmute and sort of follow on with your question directly with Denis, you can ask the question now if you want.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. Yeah, the question is, as an alternative for the decision tables and the other, the box expressions, etc. There was this reference, or there was this mention of call it a reference a table kind of construct that could be used. That's at least if I understood it correctly. And I was thinking about, well, if you have normally this kind of data in external systems, you would like to make use of this. The alternative way would be to do this in storing facts, let's say, in a decision table, which is, I think, not the way, the best way to do this. And that's, I believe, why this was introduced. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're correct. Again, the language offered the flexibility of putting some data in there through lists and these kind of construct. As you mentioned, if this is a list that's going to evolve and change over time, it's probably not a good practice to embed it in there. You'll want it to be referencing an external source. Yes.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one other question that kind of two people asked different sides of the same question, and then we're gonna have to finish up. But Bob had a question about, can business users just understand and validate feel, or do you think they can really write feel? And then Daniel had a comment, which was right after that, saying you shouldn't even be using the word code with business people. Feel for them is just a way to record requirements, so that it's kind of a better kind of Excel. It'll take some time to learn it, but they can definitely read and write it. So what are your thoughts, or what are your experiences on having business people actually write it versus just being able to read it and understand it?
So here's what I think is the best example I can provide anybody. TriZetech, a few years back, we hired a chief medical informatics officer, Dr. John Zverberly, who's a medically trained doctor, pathologist, and also has some knowledge of informatics. And Dr. Zwirbeli, within a period of 3 months, created 300 decision models of healthcare. He did all that on his own, created the logic. Naturally, before that, he took Bruce Silver's method and style training and learned how to learn how the language works. But he's done so, and in the last 3 years, he's over 1,000 models that he's created that are using field, DMN, and box expression, and BPMN, and CNMN with the field expression language. So I think that attests to the fact that, as you mentioned, yes, it's a better way to say, naturally, if you show code to a doctor, he'll turn around and run. But a medical doctor I'm talking about. But if you teach them, as was Daniel suggested, that this is a way to specify the requirement of what needs to happen, you provide them with box expression to structure their logic. They like that because they can be very specific. They also like the fact that it can point at the diagram very quickly and say, here you only have 2, there should be 3 possibilities, etc. So it makes it very amicable.
So if we can teach doctors who can barely write on a prescription pad legibly to write feel and decision expressions, then probably any subject matter expert can learn to do this.
Yeah, well, naturally, as I said, don't be fooled by the shiny new object. It's not everybody that will do that easily. But if a person has a little bit of a multidimensional mindset and a little bit of an analytical mindset, they can certainly learn and feel. And the box expression makes it so visual and easy.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much, Jenny. We're going to have to cut off now and get ready for the next presentation, which is going to start in just 2 minutes. We have a short